Good morning. So here now we're going to talk about, sources of prejudice. Where does it come from? Okay? Fundamentally, prejudice is just a social behavior, and as I had perhaps told you in the past, all behaviors, physical characteristics are subject to evolutionary selection, but so are behaviors that we exhibit. So social behaviors involved in prejudice can easily have been selected for from in evolution. But prejudice is in particularly subtle forms seems to be biological rooted. I love this. There's a lot of words here, but you know what? We know how to read. We're college students. Reflexive detection of differences is an essential aspect of how we learn pattern recognition. For example, the brain contains primary modules for distinguishing colors outside of our awareness. We cannot choose not to see color differences, okay? And so even as young as 3 years old, children attribute significance to skin color. And they appear to believe that race is somehow the most important physical characteristics in determining what sort of person one is. Sorry, I'm busy here. The cat takes advantage, sees me busy. Okay. Whoa, wrong one. Okay, so now, neuroscience provides basically, if you show, what was it? The white and black subjects given a subliminal glimpse. In other words, they're going to show a face of another race very, very quickly so that you don't even realize that it's been shown to you. And all of a sudden, the amygdala flashes to life, which is, for all practical purposes, emotional responses. So if something is significant and needs to be responded emotionally, then the amygdala provides the activation for that. Or here from a more down-to-earth evolutionary perspective, you're a caveman, okay? You're living in a group. Remember, there's group size is about 24. That's what we're designed for, living in a group of about 24, where you know everybody in your group, okay? So two people are approaching you, a member of your own group that you're familiar, and one that you've never seen from another group. Who do you trust? And it's like, well, duh, right? You trust the guy you know. I mean, look, here is Fred. He's coming toward me. I've interacted with Fred every single day for the last 20 years, and he hasn't killed me yet. So chances are Fred ain't going to attack me. Okay? This other guy, I don't know. What do I know? Okay? And so it's a version of the recognition heuristic. We are programmed to prefer things we recognize, because if we recognize them, they're probably safe, right? And this is a legitimate thing. Or from a different perspective on evolution. Again, you're a caveman. You shot a deer, big deer. You can't get it all. So it's sensible for you to share it with somebody who's likely to share with you in the future. Okay? So who's going to be more likely to share with you in the future? A member of your in-group that you see every single day, or a member of an out-group that you never hardly see? All right? It's like, of course, I mean, Fred, you interact with him every single day. He's going to give you something back. Okay? So it makes sense that we should be responding in ways like this. All right. So now gender stereotypes. Stronger than racial stereotypes is what the literature has found. Men and women tend to believe these equally. See, that's kind of an interesting thing right there. 22% of men thought that the genders were equally emotional. Women responded the same. Sometimes, as we've said earlier, sometimes these stereotypes reflect reality. Sometimes they do not. Okay. But because these stereotypes show up in many different cultures, and they're quite stable. They don't change quite that much, and so all of a sudden, evolutionary psychologists are thinking that maybe they reflect reality in some way. I don't know. So, in a different way though, 1968, where women were given a short article and told to judge its quality. Okay, and the author was either John T. McKay or Joan T. McKay. And if the author was John McKay, the women rated this article as a higher quality. Okay, it was lower quality if they believed it was written by Joan. They replicated it in 1980, and they didn't find any differences. So, an interesting change across just 12 years there. Well, universally, parents announced the birth of their baby boys with more pride, and they announced the birth of their baby girls with more happiness. Okay, there's something there. I don't know, but as you know, gender discrimination in America and the West is nothing like the rest of the world. Okay, 2/3 of the world's children that are unschooled are girls. Okay, around the world, because of ultrasound, birth rate for boys is often higher than birth rate for girls. They're having a real problem with that in China, as part of that one-child policy, because if a woman is going to be allowed to have one baby, and that woman gives birth to a girl, that woman's mother-in-law is going to probably smack her around every single day for failing the family. But that's the attitude, the prevailing attitude, and it's a crazy thing that it's the women that seem to be the biggest drivers of this male preferential treatment. Oh, in fact, one time I was in Korea, and it was Korean tradition is when children come, the adults are supposed to basically give them money, gift money. And so I was sitting there in Korea, and it was Christmas time, and in comes my nephew and niece, brother and sister. And the boy comes up, and all the uncles and aunts are like giving him 50,000 won or something. And then the girl comes up, and they're giving her like 5,000 won. And it was like, oh my God. Okay. So when they come to me, we split it, and we gave the boy 5,000 and the girl 50. It didn't make up for all the other uncles and aunts that screwed her over, but you get the idea. All right. Unequal status breeds prejudice. Absolutely. Rich people tend to view poor people as lazy. There's this belief, perhaps you've heard it, that anyone can succeed in America. If you just work hard enough, anyone can be president. All right, we know this mentality. And we know it's not true, okay? So rich people are not just lazy, but they're irresponsible, they lack ambition, and so it justifies the inequality. I mean, look at Kellyanne Conway, one of Donald Trump's personal lawyers and advisors, okay? People who lose Medicaid coverage can get a job. If they're able-bodied and want to work, then they'll have employer-sponsored benefits like you and I do. Yeah, that's how it works. They're just irresponsible. That's why they don't have insurance. Interesting. So if you know the economic relationship between two groups, you can predict pretty good about the attitudes between the groups. Unequal status breeds prejudice. I just said this. The social dominance orientation. That is to say, you can take a test and get a score, and some people are high in social dominance. That is, they think that their group should dominate other social groups. Okay? And so people that are high on the social dominance orientation are much more likely to be prejudiced, and people high on the social dominance orientation are more likely to go into business, politics, or law. Okay? So it's pretty powerful measure that we can do here. The authoritarian personality. I guess I'll go down there. I'm not sure why I have ethnocentrism here. Well, here's ethnocentrism. You believe your group is superior to other ethnic and cultural groups. And so if people tend to be prejudiced, let's say people expressing anti-Semitic attitudes, right? They're prejudiced against Jewish people. They tend to also be prejudiced against others. It's probably not something about the Jewish people per se. It's something about anybody that's not us. So, a little different. The authoritarian personality, it's a personality type. And again, you can measure this with a scale. That people that favor obedience to authority, and they don't tolerate outgroups, and they don't tolerate people of lower status, it is pretty powerful, particularly prone to engage in prejudice and stereotyping. One of the readings that I have attached was, in fact, Donald Trump voters and the authoritarian personality style. So, just saying, I didn't write it, I just found it. Okay? We find that religious leaders, or any leaders, in fact, often evoke religion to basically say, look, God makes sure the world is where it's supposed to be, and if the world does, in fact, have this form of inequality, it must be cool with God because, it's God's will. Okay. Church members express more racial prejudice than non-members. They do. It's just crazy thought. You're just thinking that WWJD, I don't know. Those professing fundamental or traditional Christian beliefs are more prejudiced or express more prejudice than those that are more progressive. Okay? So these are correlational. So don't jump down my throat. Just telling you, correlations do not imply causations, but correlations are truths. Something that really is important, pain leads to aggression. We'll talk more about aggression in the next topic, which I believe is exclusively aggression. And so what happens is, like, if we feel frustrated, if we feel like we want to go on a path, okay, and there's something blocking our path or something like that, we're going to try to get the thing out of our path. I mean, that's kind of just the way it is. You know, you want to go from point A to point B, but something's blocking your path, you whack it out of the way. And so if you don't know what it is that's frustrating you, or if it's unfair, you know, like your boss yells at you, you can't attack the boss, right? The boss yells at you, prevents you from achieving some goal, you're frustrated, and so you can't attack the boss, so you kicked it off. Okay? And so that's the idea. You have this frustration, it leads to aggression. But if you don't have the ability, or if you can't even put your finger on the source of the frustration, or if the source of the frustration is not something that you can attack, then just like with the dog here, that the aggression will manifest itself somewhere else. And so between 1882 and 1930, in the South, lynchings were highest when cotton prices were lowest. So clearly, cotton farmers and all of the people around cotton farmers, you know, the whole economy in that area, that if cotton prices are low, then all of a sudden they can't afford, and their bills start to build up, and they start to feel frustration, and you can't attack the price of cotton, right? You can't attack that, okay? So competition for scarce resources is an important part of frustration. Realistic group conflict theories basically says prejudice arises from the competition between groups for these scarce resources. And so all of a sudden, based on the unemployment rate in Canada, based on the unemployment rate, you can predict opposition to immigration. So when unemployment is high, there's a lot of opposition to immigration, or more specifically, when jobs are scarce, then there's more. This one. Social identity. Yeah, us versus them. Remember this. We're a group-bound species. Remember, cavemen, we were born to live in a group of 20 to 25. Right? This is we are we and you are you, or us versus them. Right? So this is what we're prepared to be. We define ourselves based on these groups. And so what happens is our social identity, the we aspect, the part of who am I that comes from group membership. Remember, in the West here, our social identity comes from a lot of individual characteristics. You know, I am tall. But clearly, even here in the West, where we're individualistic, we're still going to have, I am a member of my family or community. Okay? Social identity theories proposes that we categorize people, including ourselves, and we identify with certain groups. We compare ourselves to these other groups. And so this in-group versus out-group. I like this image down here. Jamaican Canadian. So the guy was born in Jamaica, moved to Canada, and he in fact ran in the Olympics in 1988, I think, for Canada. Okay? And so all of a sudden, when he wins his medal, he's like, wow, a victory for Canadian, you know. After they took it away because he was busted for steroids, all of a sudden he was Jamaican. I was like, wait, what? So he was Canadian when you have a gold medal, and he's Jamaican as soon as the gold medal is stripped. Okay, that's interesting. So categorization is just, it's what we do. I mean, we have to categorize. Take my cognitive class and we'll talk about how categorization is at the fundamental basis of all cognitive processes. I mean, that's what Piaget has in, you know, the assimilation and accommodation of schemas, right? I mean, the entire cognitive structures are based on categorization. So we simplify our environment. Without categorization, our environment is filled with, you know, 5,000 random items. With categorization, we have 10 categories, okay? So once a person has been categorized, then all of a sudden it takes on qualities of that group. So what happens is that, and then this transferring of characteristics is especially true if we're tired, preoccupied, young, aroused, and stuff. Here, people that are less prejudiced are less, they don't care about misclassifying. So what happens is somebody, you know, you say, what race is this person? A person that is low in prejudice will just give an answer quite quickly. A person that is high in prejudice will take a long time because they're worried about putting this person into the wrong category. Illusory correlations can definitely lead to prejudice. And this is basically the idea that it's a preconceived idea. Prejudice is, no, what am I saying? Racism is a preconceived idea that is stubborn, that doesn't change in the face of new information. And so if Harriet tends to selectively remember only those deceptive business relationships with Jews and the honest ones with non-Jews, she's likely to develop an illusory correlation. And so what it is she's just remembering, and so all of a sudden, even if these ratios are exactly the same, okay, you take a look, this is the truth here, what Harriet has had in her lifetime. But if she only remembers one type versus another, this non-relationship will all of a sudden look as though it's a relationship. Prejudice can come also because of the outgroup homogeneity effect. That is, all of them look the same. All of us have our differences. We have lots of differences from each other, but they all look the same. Okay? We also have the own race bias, which is this tendency for people to recognize faces of their own race. Take a look down there. Recognition, accuracy, race of photos, what the race of the subjects were, and lo and behold, white people identify white people better, and black people identify black people better. And so this is clearly a major problem when it comes to criminal proceedings, right, and witness identification. We'll talk some of that later. This is an interesting one. Distinctive people. A distinct person in a group is perceived as exaggerated good or bad stuff. And so that is, the stereotypes are even stronger, whether they're good or bad, okay? So it's this idea that if you're the only one, not just a minority, but the only one. And so, yeah, it's a strange effect. The group serving bias. And we talked about this earlier in some topic where we talked about the self. And we said in America, the self-serving bias, in individualistic America, the self-serving bias is a powerful, powerful thing. And in collectivistic cultures, the group-serving bias is a powerful, powerful thing. But don't get me wrong, I mean, both, we get both self and group-serving bias in both types of cultures. So group-serving bias is to explain away outgroups' positive behaviors, right? Oh, sure, they did good, but. And then the same thing, sure, a member of my group did something bad, but, okay? And so to kind of excuse, all right, to dismiss the good stuff that the other group did and to excuse the bad stuff that my own group did. And by the way, if you want to see group serving bias, read the comment section on a Fox News website. Holy moly. Okay, and then finally here, the just world phenomenon, and this is a kind of a belief, almost like from Hinduism, right? Karma in Hinduism is the idea that, life is a series of cycles of birth, death and rebirth, right? And so reincarnation. And what happens is that the status that you have in life now is a result of what you did in the lifetime before. And so somehow being good now progresses you towards take a religion class. But the idea is that this is cosmic karma, that if you are suffering, you must have done something to deserve it, right? Because what goes around comes around, okay? And so just observing another person becoming a victim makes us think they're a bad person, right? They must have done something to deserve it, so there it is. All right, so we've talked about prejudice, and we've talked about, things that lead into prejudice. Now the question is, what about the other side? Somebody's going to be the receiver of this prejudice, and how do they respond?